We talking about sports. It's Roland here, and I'm joined by Justin, and we are back with the last edition of the We Talking About Sports big board for the quarterback position. That's right. We're here with the fifth quarterback. We've gotten through the top four. We had the draft combine this past weekend. We saw some people wow. Justin's boy Anthony Richardson ran a 4.3. Justin, before we get into this fifth quarterback here that we're going to talk about, and we're showing the highlights here for those of you guys watching on YouTube and Facebook. What do you think about the combine? Anybody pop off the screen for you?
It's who we talked about, Roland Anthony Richardson. He had, one of the highest rated, I believe what they call it is the RAS is the term they use for combine. He had 100. Cam Newton had 99. Culpepper had 98. Like his measurables are insane, and I think he's wowing a lot of the people on Twitter. You're starting to see the hype get around him. So
Yeah, workout warrior. You mentioned his odds
he's
shrinking.
doing backflips. Roland, what I didn't expect to hear out of the combine was that he interviewed the best.
Really? Okay,
Yes,
I
so
wasn't
that's
expecting
interesting
to hear that
too.
either. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. So he's interviewing the best. He's obviously, showing these NFL teams that he has a good mind. So that's always important, especially when you talk about these workout warriors, like Anthony Richardson, like you said, wowing everybody on Twitter, probably had the best, if you will, combine of any quarterback of past memory. And that even includes, the guy like Will Levis that everybody was wowed with his arm. This past draft combine, but everyone's still talking about Anthony Richardson. But let's get into it. It's our fifth quarterback. It's the oldest quarterback in the group. It's none other than Hendon Hooker, the senior quarterback out of Tennessee, 6'3", 217 pounds. This past year, he threw for 3,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And that's following up a good 2021 campaign where he threw for about 3,031 himself. The bad thing with him, obviously, other than his age, is he did tear his ACL on November 20th against South Carolina. A couple of things that people like about him is he does have a live arm. He's got that quick release. He has the accuracy in the mid to short range. And he just tested at the combine, or not the combine rather, but senior day with 10.5-inch hands. Justin, you're not your boy, but Hendon Hooker led a very good Tennessee offense this past year. Did you catch a couple of these SEC games that included Tennessee?
Oh yeah, I was watching the Alabama game that Saturday because you wanted to see if the hype was going to be real for Tennessee. They hadn't beat Alabama in quite some time. It was over a decade since they beat Alabama. They played them at home in Neyland, and they ended up getting the win. They tore down the goalpost, and somehow it ended up in the river. So yeah, that was a big game for them. It felt like Tennessee was back with what's his name? Is it Josh Heupel? Is that the quarterback or the
Josh
coach's
Dobbs.
name?
Yeah, Josh Dobbs.
No, the quarterback's name is it Josh Heupel?
You said you feel.
The coach's name. My bad.
Oh, the coach's name. I'm blanking out on his name. Oh,
Same,
you
but
mean
he's
back when they
brought
had
them
Phil
back. He's
Fulmer.
brought Tennessee back, and he's bringing Neyland back. So I'm blanking out on the name too.
Yeah, I think they're bringing him back to the days of 1998. But the name of the coach that you're thinking about is Josh Heupel.
There it is, Josh
Bringing him
Heupel.
back to the
Yeah,
Phil Fulmer days.
yeah.
But yeah, Justin, what's your favorite part about Hendon Hooker's game? I mentioned his quick release and the accuracy in the mid range. Do you think that's going to do serve him well in the next level and translate to the pro ranks?
I think it's his quick game rolling, that mid to short range game. It's very accurate. Like we mentioned before, or me and you when we were talking off camera, 70% completion rate for Hendon Hooker. So he's very smart. And like guys before that we mentioned, this guy's not necessarily coming off because of his measurables. It's because he commanded Tennessee offense very well. So he's a guy who really understood the offense that was instilled with Josh Heupel this year, and the results showed. He was able to start 11 games. I think maybe he lost one that he was a starter in, which was the Georgia game, and of course they lost the South Carolina game. That's the second game they had lost this year, but he was no longer the starter at that point.
Yeah, and he found himself in Heisman contention at one point this year. That this Tennessee squad really took the nation by storm with the way that they started the year, and it really ended up with this victory over Alabama that we're showing here on the screen. That's really what it culminated in, because as you mentioned, they weren't able to defeat Georgia, and then he ended up getting hurt in that loss against South Carolina. But he doesn't have the measurables of the Will Levis. He's not going to run the 4.40 that Anthony Richardson is going to run. But the one thing that you're going to get from this guy is he has the quick throws, he has the accuracy. He didn't run a pro style offense in college. That's the other knock about him. But I do have confidence in him that if he gets into the system, he's going to be a backup. He's going to have a chance to study that offense. I have no doubt in my mind that he'll, be able to kind of master that offense, maybe in a backup role and come in and, be a pitch reliever. Cause that's really what I see for his ceiling as a pro. I don't know if he's going to turn into a starter. We mentioned his age at
25.
25. Another guy that came in pretty old, I think he came in older, was Brandon Whedon. But you just start to think about the clock on these guys. And when you're competing with, 22 and 21-year-olds in some cases, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the GM. So for me, if he can come in, master an NFL offense, show that he can make these quick reads, get the ball out of his hands quickly, I think he can, translate to be, somewhat of like a perennial, a backup, if you will, kind of like a Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know if his game necessarily translates to that level of play, but when you look at, he has a good but not great arm. He's accurate. He's athletic, but not the most athletic guy out of the bunch. That's kind of where my eyes are, kind of where my mind gravitates towards when I start talking about, pro comps with these guys. Have you had a chance to think about a pro comp with, I was going to call him Josh Dobbs, but have you had a chance to think about a pro comp with Hendon Hooker?
Yeah, and I won't, man, it's hard to say pro comp because I don't even know if this guy's in the NFL anymore, where he was drafted or whatnot. But he kind of reminds me his game style, Kyle Trask from Florida.
Okay.
You remember that guy?
Yeah,
Similar
Kyle Trask, he's going to
measurables
start for the
and similar
Bucks.
offensive style. Yeah. But if I want to just talk a little bit about some of the strengths, where he could maybe translate into the NFL offense, his usage of the tight end, Bro McCoy this year. That's a kid that 6'4", got real physical guy. He's a receiver converted to tight end. Um, he was using him a lot this year. He was like, I don't know if he had like over 500, 600 yards receiving. So there's that little piece of his game that maybe can translate to the NFL, the usage of the tight end.
Yeah, and when you start, drafting at this level, you start talking about, the fifth quarterback on the draft board. There is, the chance that we could see a Hendon Hooker slide in the draft. Justin, do you
Yeah,
do you
drop.
see that potentially happening with him? Maybe falling out into the later rounds because as we start to, I think, we've talked about his weaknesses and his strength as a prospect, and I think we kind of know where it might fall for him. Who knows if he, exceeds people's expectations, but do you see him being a candidate for someone who can slide into the draft?
Absolutely. And I would have probably thought he would have locked in a better spot in our big board had it not been for the ACL injury. I probably would have had him maybe even 3 over Levis and Richardson because he is very talented this year. But you have to get over the age hump, he overage prospect, and then you have to get over the ACL tear. That's a lot to get over when you're drafting. I just could see him sliding way back into the later days.
Yeah, and I know it's, different times, and my memory is probably going to fail me, but didn't Brandon Whedon get drafted in the first round? I know this is completely different, and maybe Brandon Whedon, if we look back at it, was a much better prospect than Hendon Hooker, and obviously he doesn't have the ACL. But for me, I look at Hendon Hooker, I look at what he did at the college ranks, and then again, I'm, using my memory, and I think back to Brandon Whedon, and I just got to think, Hendon Hooker is probably a better quarterback at this stage in their career than Brandon Whedon was coming out of college. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just making that comparison to say that, you got a guy like Brandon Whedon that got drafted in the first round, and then you have the opportunity maybe to draft a guy like Hendon Hooker in the, fifth or maybe sixth round if he falls that far, because of the age. Because I can see somebody, opting to take that quarterback out of Stanford over Hendon Hooker. They're staring at both of them, in the third or fourth round. They want to take a flyer on the younger guy and not the 25-year-old. So that's, the kind of the difficulties that Hendon Hooker is going to be finding himself in. I don't know what his recovery status is. I know he got hurt November 20th against South Carolina. So that kind of puts him, behind the 8 ball when you start thinking about he probably won't have a pro day
Yeah.
when you think about it. So that's another thing he's going to have to overcome when these other guys are going to, probably have pro days. So we're going to have this ranking at 5 for Hendon Hooker, but who's to say that I'm
Someone doesn't
blanking on
jump him.
the quarterback from
Tanner
Stanford had a
McKee.
good pro day, Cameron King. The quarterback from BYU looked pretty good at the um, at
Yeah,
the draft
he's making some
combine.
serious throws. Yeah.
Stetson Bennett impressed people at the draft combine, might be playing himself into, being drafted and making those conversations happen. So a lot of things working against Hendon Hooker. He's obviously number 5 here because of the production and kind of what the body of work that he's already put out there in the college ranks and, kind of what he is as a prospect. 6'3", leaves a little bit to be desired with his weight at 217. But he has the makings, of a potential NFL quarterback, and if things go right, maybe he can spend a season or two as a starter and see kind of what happens there. But that's it, really for me on Hendon Hooker. Justin, I know this next position group that we're going to talk
Yeah.
about is probably is you're going to be smiling a lot,
I'm
especially
already
when you talk
smiling, man.
about number one. Can you give the fans here, the followers, a preview of what's to come with the running backs?
Everyone knows who's going to be big board number 1, but let's just say we're getting into the running backs, and my guy's going to be on that list somewhere. And I mean, you probably know where he's at, so
Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much, but I think we've given enough as
Yeah,
is.
and as the NFL evolves, these positions evolve, and the prototype, if you will, changes. So you're going to see on this NFL running back big board list, at least for me, when I was looking at this crop of running backs, that these running backs are really catered to today's game, meaning they have a receiving and a running game to them. So a lot of dynamicism, or I don't know what the word
Dynamic
is
backs,
there.
yeah.
You got some dynamic backs that we're going to be talking about. So just very exciting stuff. This was the quarterback list. This was our top 5. I want to say it's subject to change with these pro days coming up. Who knows who's going to move up and down the boards? I know Justin and I were already talking about moving Anthony Richardson up from where we had him at 4. So we'll see. But that's the fun part about this draft process. People start nitpicking things. We heard, and I'm sorry to digress, but we heard people talk about Bryce Young, not even, weighing or not even being 6 feet, 5'10" smaller than
5'10" and
Kyler
5'8".
Murray. Yeah. So, a lot of things that the people are going to start looking at. But for we talking about sports, the next thing we're going to talk about is the running backs, and I'm excited to talk about it. So we'll be here next week.
Can't wait to get into it. Peace.